My name is Robert Mitchell. I am 76 years old, and tonight I want to tell you something I have never told anyone out loud before. You see that phone right there? I bought it in 1987. Same year my son Daniel started 3rd grade. Back then, that phone rang all the time. My wife calling from the grocery store, my sister calling from Cincinnati, Daniel calling from his friend's house. Dad, can I stay for dinner? Those were good sounds. That phone has not rung in 3 years and 4 months. Not once. My son is alive. He is healthy. He is successful. He just does not call. Now, before you get angry at him, I want you to hear the whole story. Because I have had a long time to sit in this room and think, and I have realized something that took me 70 years to understand. The wall between me and my son, I built it, brick by brick, year by year, with my own hands, while I thought I was building his future. So if you have children, listen to me carefully. And if you are someone's child, listen even more carefully. Because what I am about to tell you, I wish someone had told me at your age. I would have done everything differently. This is my story, from the very beginning to right here, right now, in this room. I have nothing left to hide, and I have nothing left to lose. So let me tell you the truth. I was born in 1948, Millfield, Ohio. Population, not many. My father, Harold Mitchell, worked at the coal mine 6 days a week. My mother, Ruth, took care of me and my 2 sisters and somehow always made sure there was food on the table. I don't know how she did it. I still don't. We were not poor in the way that breaks people. We were poor in the way that teaches people. I wore the same pair of shoes for 2 school years in a row. The left one had a hole in the bottom. I used to put cardboard inside it on rainy days. I was 11 years old. But my father never complained, not once. He came home dirty, exhausted, sometimes with blood on his hands from the work. And he would sit down at that dinner table, look at all 3 of us and say, "We are blessed." I used to think he was fooling himself. Now I understand what he meant. I was not a brilliant student, but I was a hard worker. I got my first job at 13, delivering newspapers before school every single morning, rain or snow. I saved every dollar, not because I had a plan, but because I had watched my father his whole life and I had made one silent promise to myself. I will not struggle the way he struggled. I will build something. By 18, I had enough saved to take 1 semester of community college. I studied accounting, not because I loved numbers, but because I heard you could get a steady job with accounting. And in Millfield, Ohio, in 1966, a steady job was the most beautiful thing you could imagine. I graduated at 22. Got a job at a small manufacturing company in Columbus. Nothing glamorous, but I had a paycheck. I had a 1-bedroom apartment, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was going somewhere. I had no idea that the most important moment of my life was about to walk through a diner door. It was a Tuesday, October 14th, 1971. I remember the exact date because I have thought about it every single day since. I walked into Miller's Diner on 5th Street because it was raining and I didn't have an umbrella. And there she was, Margaret Ann Collins. She was sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee, reading a paperback novel, completely unbothered by the whole world. She had dark brown hair and she was wearing a green coat. And when she looked up at me, just for a second because I had bumped into a stool, she laughed. Not at me, just this easy, comfortable laugh, like she was already my friend. I had never felt that before. I sat down 2 stools away. I ordered coffee I didn't need. For 20 minutes, I said absolutely nothing. Just stole glances. Then finally I said, and I am not proud of this, "Is that book any good?" She looked at me, then looked at the book, then looked back, and she said, "I don't know yet, but I have a feeling the ending might surprise me." And I thought, I hope she is talking about more than the book. We talked for 2 hours that night, about everything, about nothing, about Ohio and growing up, and what we wanted our lives to look like someday. Margaret wanted a house with a garden. I told her I wanted a house where nobody had to put cardboard in their shoes. She got quiet for a moment when I said that. Then she reached across the counter and put her hand on mine. Just for a second. That was it. I was completely done. We were married 18 months later, June 4th, 1973. Small ceremony, 40 people. My mother cried the whole time. Margaret was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life, and I told myself that day, I am going to spend every year I have left making sure this woman never struggles. I am going to give her everything my mother never had. I meant that with everything I had. We had 3 years, just the 2 of us. Simple years, happy years. Then, on March 17th, 1976, the doctor put a tiny, screaming baby in my arms. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. A boy, Daniel Harold Mitchell. I named him Harold after my father. I looked at that baby and I felt something I had no word for. It was bigger than love. It was more like responsibility, purpose, and I made him a promise right there in that hospital room, out loud so he could hear me. I said, "I will give you everything I never had, everything." That promise was the beginning of every mistake I ever made. When Daniel was small, everything was wonderful. He was a bright boy, curious, always asking questions. "Dad, why is the sky blue?" "Dad, how do trains work?" I didn't always know the answer, but I never said, "I don't know." I always went and found out. I wanted him to think his father had all the answers. I should have taught him how to find answers himself. That was my first mistake. Every problem Daniel had, I solved it. Every struggle he faced, I removed it. Kids at school teasing him? I went to the principal the next morning. Failed a test? I paid for a private tutor. Didn't make the baseball team? I hired a coach. I thought I was being a good father. What I was actually doing was teaching my son that when life gets hard, someone else will fix it. I just didn't know it yet. By the time Daniel was 16, it was clear he was exceptional. Top of his class, science competitions, math awards. His guidance counselor called me in one afternoon and said, "Mr. Mitchell, your son could get into any university in this country." I drove home that day and I cried in the parking lot of a Walmart. I am not embarrassed to tell you that. I thought about my father and those cardboard shoes and the coal mine, and I thought, we made it. We made it. Daniel applied to 12 universities. He got into Harvard. Full tuition, no scholarship. The cost was more than I made in a year. I didn't hesitate for 1 second. I went to the bank the following Monday and took out a second mortgage on our house. Margaret stood beside me while I signed the papers. She didn't say a word, but I saw her face. She was scared. I told her, "This is what we worked for. This is everything." She nodded. She trusted me. I will carry that trust with me until I die. I worked 60 hours a week for the next 4 years. I took a second job on weekends doing accounting for small businesses. Margaret went back to work part-time at the library. We stopped going out to dinner. We stopped taking vacations. I wore the same winter coat for 11 years. The left sleeve had a tear in it. I kept meaning to get a new one. I never did. There was always something more important to spend that money on. There was always Daniel. Did Daniel know how much we sacrificed? Honestly, I don't think so. Because I never told him. I never wanted him to feel guilty. I never wanted him to feel like he owed me anything. I thought that was generous. That was my second great mistake. When you give without the other person ever understanding the cost, they cannot value the gift. They simply come to expect it. That is what I created. A man who expected and never noticed. Daniel graduated Harvard in 1998, top quarter of his class. He moved to New York City immediately and got a job at a big law firm. His salary in the first year was more than I had made in the previous 5 years combined. I was so proud I could barely speak. I told everyone, the man at the hardware store, the woman at our church, my son is a lawyer in New York City. I said it like it was a prayer, like it was the answer to every hard year I had ever lived. At first, he called every Sunday, then every other Sunday, then once a month. I noticed, but I told myself, he is busy, he is building his career, this is what success looks like. I should not bother him, I should give him space. So I did. I gave him space, and the space just kept growing. In 2002, Daniel met a woman named Christine Hargrove. Her family had old money. They owned property in Connecticut and a summer house on Cape Cod. Christine was not a bad person. I want to be fair to her. She was simply from a world that had no room for a father in a torn coat from a small town in Ohio. And Daniel, my Daniel, slowly began to see us through her eyes. And through her eyes, we were an embarrassment. I felt that, even when no one said it out loud. Every time I visited and saw how he straightened up when I spoke, every time a subject about my work was quickly changed, I felt it, and I said nothing, because I did not want to lose him, so I made myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared. Margaret got sick in 2008. Breast cancer, stage 3. She fought for 2 years, the bravest 2 years I have ever witnessed. Daniel came home twice during that time, twice in 2 years. Each visit was 3 days. He was always distracted, always on his phone. Margaret never said anything. She just watched him and smiled. She was protecting him even then, even at the end. That was who Margaret was. She protected everyone, including the people who didn't deserve it. Margaret passed away on November 3rd, 2010, a Thursday morning, 6:47 a.m. I was holding her hand. Daniel arrived that evening. He left 2 days later. He said he had a case he couldn't postpone. I stood in the driveway and watched his rental car leave. And for the first time in my life, I felt afraid of the silence. Because this time, I knew the silence wasn't temporary. This was just how it was going to be now. I lived alone in that house for 6 years after Margaret died. I kept everything exactly the way she had arranged it. Her reading glasses were on the kitchen table for 3 years before I could move them. I know how that sounds, but that house was the only place I still felt her, and I was not ready to stop feeling her. My health started declining in 2014. My heart. Nothing dramatic, just the slow, quiet way a body tells you it has been working a long time. I had some falls, nothing serious, but Daniel found out. And I think that frightened him. Not because of worry for me, I think it frightened him because of responsibility. Because if I was truly getting old, then what was he supposed to do about it? And the answer he chose was to find someone else to be responsible. He came to visit in April of 2016, first time in almost 2 years. I cooked a big dinner. I bought a new shirt. I was so happy he was coming, like a child waiting for Christmas morning. We had dinner, we talked, and then, over coffee, he slid a brochure across the table. Sunset Gardens Senior Living. "Dad, I think it's time. You'd be well taken care of. You wouldn't be alone." I looked at that brochure for a long time. Then I looked at my son, and I thought of the second mortgage. I thought of the torn coat. I thought of Margaret at the bank with fear in her eyes. And I thought of all the things I never said to him because I didn't want him to feel guilty. And I said, "Okay." I sold the house 3 months later, the house where Daniel was born, where Margaret and I had spent 40 years together. I packed everything that mattered into 8 boxes. 8 boxes. That is what 40 years of a life becomes when you move into one room. 8 boxes. I have been at Sunset Gardens for 9 years now. It is a decent place. The staff are kind. The food is acceptable. There is a common room with a television that is always too loud. And there are other people here like me. People with children who are busy. People who are waiting for a phone call. We understand each other without having to explain very much. That is something, I suppose. Daniel came to visit once in the first year. He called a few times. Then the calls became Christmas and my birthday. Then just Christmas. Then nothing. The last time I heard his voice was 3 years and 4 months ago. He called to say he was going through a difficult time. His marriage was having problems. I listened for an hour. I gave him every piece of advice I had. He said, "Thanks, Dad," and then he hung up. And he never called again. So now you know my story. All of it. And I imagine some of you are angry at Daniel right now. Please don't be. I mean that. Because Daniel became exactly what I made him. I made a man who never experienced real struggle. A man who never had to fight for anything. A man who never truly understood sacrifice because I hid every sacrifice from him. That is not his failure. That is mine. If I could go back, and I have thought about this more hours than you can imagine, here is what I would do differently. First, I would let him struggle. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because struggle builds something inside a person that comfort never can. Struggle builds character. Struggle builds gratitude. Struggle builds the ability to sit with someone in their pain instead of running from it. I took that from him by removing every obstacle, and in doing so, I took something from myself too. Second, I would have let him see the sacrifice, not to make him feel guilty, but because when you hide the cost of love from someone, they cannot understand the value of what they have received. I thought hiding the mortgage and the torn coat was kindness. It was actually blindness. I blinded him to the truth of how much things cost, how much life costs. And so when I needed him later, he genuinely did not understand what I had invested, because I had never shown him the receipt. Third, and this is the one that hurts the most to say, I would have saved something for myself and for Margaret. We gave Daniel everything, and somewhere along the way, we forgot to live. We forgot to take that vacation. We forgot to go out to dinner. We forgot that our marriage also needed investment. Margaret deserved more than the leftover hours of a man who gave his best energy to a child. And I can never give her those years back. That is the heaviest thing I carry, every single day. I am not telling you this story to make you sad. I am telling you this because I believe with everything I have left in me that what happened to me does not have to happen to you. If you are a parent right now, love your children, deeply, fiercely, but do not disappear into them. You are a person too. Your life matters too. Teach them about sacrifice by living an honest life in front of them, not by silently destroying yourself behind closed doors. And if you are someone's child hearing this, call your parents. Not when it is convenient, not on holidays only. Call them on a Tuesday. Ask them about their week. Ask them what they dreamed about when they were young. You will learn things about them that will break your heart open in the best possible way. And one day, I promise you this, one day they will be gone, and you will give anything to hear their voice one more time. Don't wait for that day. Call today. My name is Robert Mitchell. I am 76 years old, and I thank you for spending this time with me tonight. It means more than you know. If this story touched something in you, if it made you think about your own life, your own family, your own choices, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like mine, told honestly and without shame, can save someone else from making the same walk I made down that long hallway alone. If you are new here, welcome to Senior Untold Stories. Every week we share stories like mine, real experiences, hard lessons, voices that the world does not always stop to hear. Subscribe so you never miss one, and leave a comment below. Tell me what part of this story stayed with you. I will read every single one. Take care of the people you love while you still can. Good night.